The Alaska Summit is not just another meeting, not just another gathering of leaders shaking hands and exchanging words. No, this is something that cuts deeper, something that shakes the walls of history, something that draws a line in the snow where the old world ends and a new one begins. The Alaska Summit, it is a game changer for India, and the world must understand why. For too long, the balance of power was controlled by a few, dictated by voices that claimed authority over the destiny of others. For too long, India was expected to remain silent, to nod its head, to follow rules that were never made with its interests in mind. But there comes a time when silence is no longer an option, when respect is not begged for but commanded, when a nation no longer bends under pressure but stands tall under fire. The Alaska Summit was that time. What happened there was not just politics, not just diplomacy. It was the moment India showed that it is not a participant waiting to be recognized. It is a force demanding recognition. It is not a guest in the hall of power. It is an architect building its own halls, and when that voice echoed across the summit, the world heard something different. They heard strength, clarity, and defiance. They heard a message that cannot be ignored. India will not be dictated to. India will not be lectured. India will not be underestimated. Think about it. For decades, global powers pointed fingers at India. They spoke of democracy yet tried to control it. They spoke of peace yet armed its enemies. They spoke of fairness yet treated India as if it were still in the shadows of its colonial past. But the Alaska Summit changed the script. It was no longer about India sitting quietly in the corner while two giants argued. It was about India looking those giants in the eye and saying enough. This was not arrogance. This was confidence born from progress, from sacrifice, from the sweat and blood of a billion people who built their nation brick by brick, idea by idea, dream by dream. It was not about defying for the sake of defiance. It was about demanding respect that had been earned through resilience, through strength, through relentless pursuit of dignity. India walked into that summit carrying centuries of struggle, but it walked out carrying the torch of a new destiny. The message was not just for the United States, not just for China, not just for Europe. The message was for the world. India is awake. India is unshakable. India is unstoppable. What makes the Alaska Summit a game changer is not the stage, not the microphones, not the cameras. What makes it a game changer is the courage to speak truth to power, the courage to stand tall when others expect you to bow. It is easy to play along, to compromise, to seek comfort in silence, but comfort is not what builds nations. Confrontation with truth does, and India embraced that confrontation. Do you realize how powerful that is? A nation that once was seen as the land of cheap labor and outsourced services now stands as a technological powerhouse, a military force, an economic giant. A nation that once was expected to follow orders now has the power to shape orders. The Alaska Summit proved that India is not only in the game, it is rewriting the rules of the game, and here is why it matters. The summit, it was not only about geopolitics, it was about psychology. Power is as much about perception as it is about position. For decades, India was perceived as hesitant, as cautious, as unwilling to take risks. But when its representatives stood in Alaska, firm and unshaken, that perception shattered. The world saw a new India, an India unafraid of pressure, an India that does not tolerate hypocrisy, an India that knows its worth. This psychological shift is what changes the future. When 1 billion people see their nation stand tall, they themselves begin to stand taller. When the world sees a nation refuse to bow, it thinks twice before pushing it down again. And when leaders in distant capitals realize that India cannot be manipulated, they are forced to negotiate, not dominate. The Alaska Summit was not about words spoken in one room. It was about the ripple effect that will be felt across oceans and continents. It was about a nation moving from the edge of history to the center stage of destiny, and that is why it is a game changer. Do not think for a moment that this was easy. Courage never is. Strength never is. To look power in the eye and call out its hypocrisy is to invite resistance, to invite criticism, to invite pressure. But nations are not built on avoiding resistance. They are built on enduring it. Nations are not remembered for their silence. They are remembered for their voice, and in Alaska, India found its voice. This voice is not temporary. It is not a burst of emotion. It is the beginning of a new tone, a new stance, a new reality. India has always had the potential. It has always had the numbers, the minds, the spirit. But now it has the platform. And when potential meets platform, transformation begins. The game has changed because India will no longer accept double standards. You cannot preach climate change to India while burning coal in your own backyard. You cannot speak of democracy while supporting dictatorships when convenient. You cannot demand open markets while shutting doors on Indian talent. The Alaska summit was India's way of saying, we see through the hypocrisy and we will not play along anymore. This matters not only for India, it matters for every nation that has been pushed aside, lectured, underestimated. India's stand is not just for itself. It is a beacon for the global south, a signal to developing nations that they too can demand respect. They too can command attention. They too can stand tall. India has shown them how. And this is what the old powers fear. They fear not India's weapons, not its economy, not its population. They fear its awakening, because once a nation awakens to its true power, it cannot be chained again. And India is awake. The Alaska summit was proof. Look at the chain reaction this creates. Nations now approach India differently. They calculate differently. They respect differently. Investors see a strong partner. Allies see a dependable force, rivals see a formidable opponent, and the people of India see a mirror that reflects their strength back at them. That is the transformation. That is why the summit is a turning point. But do not mistake this for the end of the journey. It is only the beginning. A summit does not change destiny overnight. What it does is ignite the spark, fuel the fire, awaken the will, and once that will is awakened, nothing can stop it. India must continue to walk this path, continue to hold its ground, continue to turn its voice into action, its stance into results, its vision into reality. The Alaska summit matters because it has shifted momentum. Momentum is invisible but unstoppable once it begins. The momentum now carries India forward, not as a shadow, not as a side player, but as a leader shaping the new order. And the world must accept it. Whether it resists or embraces, it cannot ignore. There are moments in history when everything changes. They are not always dramatic battles or bloody revolutions. Sometimes they are moments in rooms where words are spoken with the weight of nations behind them. Alaska was one such moment. It was the moment when India told the world that the time of playing small is over, the time of hesitation is over, the time of waiting for recognition is over. India is no longer waiting. India is leading, India is defining, India is changing the game, and that is why the Alaska summit is not just an event. It is a declaration that India has arrived, that India will not be moved by pressure, that India will shape its own destiny. The fire has been lit, the momentum has begun, and the game has changed forever. One bold stand in Alaska showed that India is no longer waiting for recognition. It is leading the game. That moment was not just about diplomacy, not just about exchanging words across a table, not just about political theater. It was about a shift in power, a declaration of identity, a revelation of confidence that had been building for years, for decades, for generations. When India stood firm in Alaska, it was not just representing its government, it was carrying the voice of more than 1 billion people who had waited too long to be seen as equals on the global stage. That stand was more than a statement. It was a demonstration that the days of waiting quietly for validation are over. that the days of playing by rules written elsewhere are finished, that the days of being told what to do, how to think, how to act are gone. India is no longer standing in the shadows of giants. India has become the giant. The world has always been comfortable placing India in a box. A country of culture, yes. A country of spirituality, yes. A country of poverty and problems, yes. But rarely did the world acknowledge India as a country of power, of strength, of authority. And why? Because the old powers never wanted that narrative to change. They wanted India to remain a follower, a balancing piece, a participant but never a leader. But when India spoke in Alaska, it did not just speak for itself. It shattered the box. It showed the world that the narrative they had written was outdated, broken, irrelevant. Recognition is no longer needed. Respect is demanded. Leadership is no longer granted. It is claimed, and India claimed it with boldness that could not be ignored. That stand was not arrogance. It was earned. It came from decades of sacrifice, from millions lifting themselves out of poverty, from entrepreneurs building companies that now rival the world's best, from scientists who put a rover on the moon for less than the budget of a Hollywood film, from soldiers who protect borders in the harshest conditions, from a people who refuse to accept limits. It was a stand born from the belief that India is not defined by what it once was, but by what it has become and what it is becoming. This was not a country asking for a seat at the table. This was a country saying, we bring our own table, and if you want to discuss the future, you will sit with us. The boldness of Alaska lies in its simplicity. Power often hides behind complex strategies, behind endless discussions, behind polite words that mean nothing. But true power is the courage to speak with clarity, to refuse to bend under pressure, to reveal truth when others cover it with diplomacy. That is what India did. It did not bow to lectures, it did not yield to criticism, it did not soften its tone for comfort. It stood tall, spoke direct, and reminded the world that hypocrisy will not go unchallenged. This is what leading the game looks like, not aggression for its own sake, but strength with purpose, defiance with dignity, vision with certainty. When a nation leads, it does not wait for permission. It does not wait for applause. It does not wait for recognition from those who have always sought to keep it down. Leadership means stepping forward even when others want you to stay behind. That is why Alaska matters. It was the moment India showed it would no longer wait. Waiting is for those unsure of their place, those unsure of their worth. India is sure now. The time of hesitation is gone. The time of doubt is gone. The time of waiting is gone. The future belongs to those who take it, and India is taking it. This leadership is not about domination. It is not about replacing one empire with another. It is about showing a path, setting an example, leading by conviction rather than coercion. When India stood bold in Alaska, it was not just asserting itself against the traditional powers. It was inspiring others, nations in Africa, in Asia, in Latin America, nations that have been pushed to the sidelines, treated as pawns instead of partners. They saw in India's stand a mirror, a possibility, a proof that they too can rise, they too can refuse to bow, they too can lead. India's boldness was not just for itself, it was a spark for others to awaken. And this is what the old order fears. They do not fear India's economy alone, though it is growing faster than theirs. They do not fear India's population alone, though it is larger than theirs. They do not fear India's technology, its army, its resources alone. They fear the moment when India realizes fully what it is capable of and refuses to be contained. That fear became reality in Alaska, because once a nation makes a stand like that, it can never go back to silence. Once a people see their leaders hold the line, they will never accept weakness again. Once respect is demanded and earned, it can never again be denied. Consider what leadership means in this context. It means rewriting the rules of engagement. It means refusing to be judged by double standards. It means telling the world that you cannot lecture on democracy while undermining it. You cannot preach equality while practicing exclusion. You cannot demand responsibility while shirking your own. India in Alaska called out these contradictions. That bold stand was a reminder that global leadership cannot rest on hypocrisy. It must rest on fairness, on truth, on equality. By standing bold, India showed that the game of geopolitics is not only about power, it is about principles. And principles are what give leadership legitimacy. The boldness of Alaska also revealed the strength of unity. Behind the voice of leaders at that summit stood the will of 1 billion people. Every word spoken carried the weight of a nation that has struggled, that has sacrificed, that has dreamed. That is what made it unshakable, because leadership is not only about strategy at the top, it is about spirit at the bottom, and when the spirit of the people rises to meet the voice of its leaders, that is when nations change history. India's bold stand was not a politician's performance. It was the spirit of a nation refusing to be ignored. This spirit cannot be measured in GDP numbers alone. It cannot be calculated in military budgets or trade deals. It is measured in the resolve of people who will not back down, who will not allow themselves to be humiliated, who will not let their destiny be written by someone else. That is why the stand in Alaska was so powerful. It was not about showing off strength. It was about revealing resolve, and resolve is what breaks empires, what overturns old orders, what creates new chapters in history. India is leading the game now because it no longer plays the game by old rules. Old rules said, accept your place, wait your turn, follow instructions. New rules say, build your own place, create your own turn, set your own instructions. Old rules said, you need recognition to matter. New rules say, you matter because you are strong, because you are capable, because you have earned it. The bold stand in Alaska marked the transition from old rules to new rules. And once the game changes, it cannot be played the same way again. That stand is also a message for every Indian inside and outside the country. It is a reminder that the world sees India differently now, that the world listens differently now, that the world treats India differently now. And with that recognition comes responsibility to continue standing bold, to continue building strength, to continue leading with conviction. Because leadership is not a moment, it is a movement. It is not about one summit, it is about the course of a nation's future. Alaska was the spark, but the fire must be kept alive. What makes this leadership powerful is not that it comes from dominance, but from resilience. Resilience built through centuries of struggle, through decades of development, through countless sacrifices that built the nation brick by brick. This is why the stand matters. It is the culmination of a journey from being dismissed as weak to being acknowledged as strong, from being told to follow to choosing to lead, from being a subject of history to becoming a writer of it. That boldness is not temporary, it is not a pose, it is the reality of a nation that knows it can no longer be sidelined, and the world knows it, rivals know it, allies know it. Every nation watching that stand in Alaska knows that something changed. They know India is no longer playing a supporting role. It is taking the lead. It is shaping the direction. It is setting the terms. That is why it was not just about a debate. It was about a declaration. India declared with action, with words, with posture, we are here to lead, and the world will adjust. One bold stand in Alaska showed that India is no longer waiting for recognition. It is leading the game.